Hello, hello. Welcome to Aphantasia Meow. I'm a little late getting started because this is my first time using YouTube Live, and I couldn't figure it out at first, but no one's on here yet, but you know what? That's all right. I don't know if anybody's going to join or not. We'll see. Hello, hello. Yeah, so I'm just going to hang out for a minute, let people roll in. Feel free to say hi in the chat. Getting started a little bit late because I didn't know how to start up YouTube Live correctly. I was trying on mobile, and then I switched to desktop, and then figured out how to do it on the webcam here. So for those of you watching right now, honestly, this live, I meant to put super informal, not super live. Super live stream or whatever I put. Super live hang. Yeah, it's super informal live hang. And my idea behind it was just like, hey, most of us across planet Earth right now are experiencing something quite unique in our day. And most of us are being confined to our homes, right? And so with another group actually yesterday, I did similar thing. I did like a live, hey, glad to have you, Heidi. I did a live hangout where 9 people just got together and talked about certain topics, you know, because even though most of the governments across the planet are advising people to stay in right now, that doesn't mean we can't connect, right? And I know for me yesterday, for the people that were in that conversation from yesterday, just all really appreciated being able to connect, even in what small way we can. So this was like, that was kind of my heart behind this, was to have it be super informal, just hang out, leave some room for question and answer, you know, time. And I also thought, why not be a little productive too and give you guys some updates. I'm sure some of you have been watching my content and been keeping up to date with how sessions and different programs and different things have been going. I just finished the Key series too, so if anybody's watched that, I'd love to hear. So does that sound good? I mean, we're just gonna hang out, you know? I don't have some grand plan for this. It's just an hour that I wanted to set aside to connect with you guys, my audience. So, and I may not even leave the stream up. I'm not sure. I'll stream it, and then we'll see how long I leave it posted for. But so if you ask some good questions, you might be able to pull some interesting info out of me, because other people might not get to see it afterwards. Let me see where I put my notes. There it is. Okay. So I figured I'd start off and like give a bit of an update, because looking back over my channel, I realized that it's been quite a while since I gave an update on how the sessions were going, or how the programs are going, and how whether or not people are getting breakthrough, right? I think the last time I gave an update video was back in, geez, when was that? I could look, but it had in the title, oh, is it right after the boot camp? That's right. So I did a boot camp back in August, and I gave an update, put an update video out there. Hey, Kayla, how's it going? Great to have you. You missed the beginning, but I just shared that this is going to be super informal, just some time to connect, because most of us across the planet are being confined to our houses, which understandably, right? So I just wanted to jump on here and have some connect time with the community, and just put out, put my time and energy into actually being a human being with other human beings. So, and I'll leave some time for Q&A too, like I said earlier. But anyways, so the last time I gave that update was right after the boot camp. And just to reiterate that, the boot camp was great. It was a preliminary program, and it was really a turning point for me too, because right before that, it was like I had worked with enough people at that point to go, okay, so people can really affect this. People can affect how they perceive their thought life. And at that point, I had worked with people experiencing aphantasia, and then people also experience what we call now hypophantasia. I didn't come up with that term. I think it just originated on the forums, which is kind of fun, on Reddit or something. And so hypophantasia describes like barely being able to create images in the mind, right? Hypo being the word for low. And so, or under. And so the boot camp, it was like this turning, it was a pivot point for me, because I had seen enough breakthrough with these types of people that I just had built this confidence over the past year and a half up until that point. And I realized, yeah, this will absolutely have a change, have an effect. And not only the stuff that I'm doing, actually, now I'm very vocal about this now. It's like, it's interesting because I've seen even people that I haven't worked with who wanted to make a change to how they perceive their thought life, whether it's creating more visual imagery or whatever. And if people really go after it, there's results, And so I kept meeting people like that. I kept working with people, and it was like this point of confidence just hit, and I go, you know what? All right, let's do a real serious program now. And that was the boot camp. That was like this big, launching point for me. And that was one of the first times that I was confident, fully confident anyway, about, yeah, I'm willing to ask for monetary stuff to have them partake, because I know it's going to get them somewhere. And so sure enough, 4 out of 4 people that joined that boot camp back in August, they ended up getting breakthrough in moments, right? So some was more drastic than others, just like always. But 4 out of 4 people had something different that they were able to experience over the course of the boot camp. And so after that, I launched into the e-courses. And that was something that was like frequently asked for, like, hey, can you do some e-courses? Can you get some digital materials out there? And I was like, yeah, I think I can do that. And so I put together an e-course, launched that in September, and 10 people ended up joining, and then 1 slid in after the end, after I closed registration, and it ended up being 11 people. And that one, it's been really interesting, because just the nature of e-courses, like, I know I've done this in the past. Sometimes you buy an e-course, you never finish, right? And so I think some of the students that jumped into there, did that kind of thing with the e-course, which is totally fine. I mean, it was work at your own pace. That was the idea. So, and some have bought it, some never finished, some did finish, and went through the whole thing and felt like it was beneficial. But it was really hard for me to measure how much actual breakthrough people were getting from that e-course, because it wasn't that one-on-one working with people. And it's just been a little bit harder to keep in contact with some of them since life gets busy. You buy a course, maybe you do half of it, and then life gets busy. So anyways, from that e-course and those 11 students, some of them now are in the Discord server, and one's talking about breakthrough now, but it's super hard for me to measure how many people were actually make progress, especially because I wasn't working directly with them, right? But still, that was a pretty decent program. And then I went through December, took a big break. And then when January hit, I had just like a flood of new students, new clients that wanted to work with me directly. And so 7 people ended up reaching out to me, or more than that, but 7 people ended up doing coaching with me. And out of the 7, 6 of them were able to get some form of breakthrough. And some of them was pretty subtle, some of them was more drastic. Actually, if I really think about it, all of them had a little more breakthrough than the lowest form of breakthrough that I've seen with people. So most of those 6 people were able to access some form of new experience in their thought process, which is really exciting. And then the other person out of the 7, she was a bit of an interesting case because she had come in and had experienced the mind's eye very vividly before, like 18 months before that. And then so I was like, well, hey, come on in. Like, you know, I don't know if what's going to happen with this. And sure enough, it may be that just practicing wasn't going to get her where she wanted to go. So that's what happened with her, that specific, the 1 out of the 7 that didn't have anything new happen. We were able to access a measure of like what she had before, but it wasn't as vivid as it used to be. So I'm still in contact with her. Actually, I got to reach out to her. But anyways, so yeah. And then I soft launched. I didn't really announce it super loud, but I kind of quietly launched another version of the ECourse, and it's on my website. And so far, what's cool is, oh yeah, Heidi says, yeah, so happy I found you. Thought for years I had a lazy concentration since I couldn't visualize. Yeah, totally. I'm glad you found me too. I'm glad I get to be part of the conversation. Honestly, it's quite fun for me, just to, you know, share what little piece I do have at this point. So I'm glad you're here. But yeah, so I soft launched this new ECourse, and that ECourse now, with the partnering with the Discord server that I launched, which is proving to be like a community hub for people that want to develop the mind's eye, has been really cool combination, because people jump into the ECourse and then they bounce off of the Discord server and talk to other people, talk to other students. In the Discord server, it's interesting because there's people that have worked with me, there's people that have not worked with me, and are bouncing breakthroughs off each other and sharing resources and stuff like that. And that's exactly what I was hoping for, that, to create a hub for people to connect on the topic of developing the mind's eye, or even other thought processes too that people want to develop, and just bounce off of it, community, and find momentum as a community. So that's exactly what it's doing. So anyway, that's just a bit of an update about where my programs are at, what more breakthroughs I've been able to see with people, how it's been going. And like I said, the breakthrough is different for everybody. Like, I would say pretty common when somebody's coming from either like really, really low hypophantasia or aphantasia specifically, like where they're not experiencing any visual imagination, then it's reasonable to expect to go through maybe like 2 to 3 weeks of practice and to see some sort of new experience. Whether that's like a flash of an image come to mind for the first time, or maybe they're thinking about something a little bit different, or maybe they have like a hypnagogic image flash when they're falling asleep at night for the first time. That kind of breakthrough is pretty common. And then less common is the more drastic types of breakthrough where people are like having full-blown mind's eye activity by the end of it. And I've had a couple of those too, but it's not really the norm at this point. It's more normal to get like the initial breakthrough, or maybe like a handful of those, and then to be able to build from it from there for them. It's kind of like learning an instrument. I've said this before in some of my other materials. It's like, you know, you can't take somebody from not being able to play piano and then 2 weeks later they're playing Bach for the London Orchestra or something like that on stage in front of 3,000 people. It takes years to get to that point, right? And that's the same as in terms of how I grew my own visual imagination and my own abilities. It took a while. It didn't happen overnight. But some of the breakthroughs I experienced back in the past did happen quite quickly, like within a week or two. But then like learning how to integrate it into life and having it be more vivid and spread out over my day-to-day, that took time. You know, it took quite a while. So I remember with prophantasia, which is, that's the term I came up with to project images out in front of you, like where you see black and then you can project an image onto the black space. The breakthrough for me for that only took geez, I mean, it was so long ago now. I remember wanting to learn how to do it, and then the kind of reverse engineering the exercises for myself. And then I practiced maybe like 2 or 3 days, and I got my first couple breakthroughs, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then from there, it took maybe 3 years to really learn how to access it consistently, to make that those projections more vivid. But I wasn't working on it every day either. So it's an overtime thing. It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. Like one of my ECourse students just shared a breakthrough in the Discord recently, and he was like, guys, I just want to reiterate, it's not a sprint, take your time. It's okay. It took him a couple months to first start seeing something different. Anyway, we're just hanging out. So like I said, super informal, and I don't want to ramble on and on, but I know I got some of you that are watching right now. How's everybody doing? I mean, this time on planet Earth is quite unprecedented, so feel free to share just how life is right now. It's just good to connect. So if you have something to throw into the chat, feel free. For me, it's like this whole situation isn't a whole lot different from my normal day-to-day, because typically I'm doing this full time now. And so I'm either working with clients from home, or I go to coffee shops to work on test drafts and stuff like that. So now I just removed the coffee shop part and some of the social aspects, of course, but it doesn't feel like a huge departure, other than I can see, I'm just very, very aware of how this is affecting the global status of people and the hearts of people, and everybody that's been affected so far. That's of course very impacting. So I hope you're all safe, and hope you're finding, comfort and support where you need to, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this today. So, but yeah, isolated for 10 days now. Yeah. So you're working from home now. Yeah. Now, were you able, Heidi, to work from home before, or is this new for you? Was it something that your workplace helped facilitate? Before I was doing Aphantasia Meow full time too. I was working as a freelance editor and videographer, so I've been working remotely for a long time. I have to remember there's a bit of delay from when I say something to when it actually shows up on the stream. So, well, you guys can feel free and share, if you like to, how it's going. And I'm glad Heidi's kind of liking the time spent alone at this point. We'll see how long it goes for. I know I'm in California, so our governor just announced 30 days, or at least like about 30 days of kind of recommended isolation. It's actually an order they put out. Oh, you're working in small groups. Yeah, that's a great idea. Hey, Charlene, great to have you. Says, thanks for doing this. I did a job once, it was awful. Worked for manufactured medical equipment. It was incredibly repetitive and made me feel quite crazy even after a few weeks. I feel you. I haven't had a normal job in quite a while. So my last one was a sales job. I was selling solar, door to door. Definitely wouldn't want to do that right now. Your comment, Charlene, stopped at because I, so maybe you meant to put some more, but I don't know, it stopped right there. And you said thanks. You're absolutely welcome. You know, I figure I'm going to be home, and just to connect with people is awesome. So I realize with a certain amount of influence, I'm doing something with my Discord server tomorrow too. With a certain amount of influence, there comes like a desire on my part to connect, and I think it does the heart really good for not just me, but all you guys too. So. Charlene finished her comment here. Could only be there versus in my head, imagining being at home now from a totally different job like you. I'm thinking people are able to think about their memories during this quarantine. Oh, yeah, it's true. Yeah, right now in California, pretty much everything is closed down. You know, restaurants, bars, anything non-essential is how the governor just put it. We're pretty much locking up, and even outside of that, they they put out an order yesterday encouraging people to even just stay home. So don't go see people, don't go see friends. You know, keep groups below nine people. But even that, they're like, try not to do. Like, it's extra hard for us being locked in during this time. What do you think? Oh, you mean for people experiencing aphantasia? So it's like being locked in. Is that what you mean, Charlene? Being locked in because it's like, what else do you have? You don't have your visual imagination to run around with. It's like, yeah. I mean, that's a really good point, you know, because somebody, let's say with hyperphantasia, gets locked in and they're able just to go on kind of a mind trip and go see other places or whatever. That's a really good point. Yeah. I think it would be hard. I mean, it's hard for hyperphantagics too. For most of us anyway. Though I must say I'm quite introverted anyway, so I like to spend quite a lot of time alone. Cabin fever comes hard for me. I'm sure hyperphantagics, aphantagics, we're all feeling it. But yeah, it's a really, really interesting point that you brought up, that being isolated and experiencing really only your memories and then TV, you know, what else do you have? I mean, you can read, you can do a hobby or something like that, but I know that stuff only goes so far. So those of you who are watching, I'm curious to hear too, have you experienced any drugs that helped open up the third eye that might help? So this is a bit of a touchy topic, right? Because some substances are not legal in certain places, other topics are, or other substances are legal in other places. And I know it can be a bit taboo. Now, what I'll say is I have heard some accounts that people have experienced the mind's eye opening up for, and I call it the mind's eye, not the third eye, just to make that distinction. Just because third eye, like that conversation gets a little esoteric, right? But the mind's eye speaks directly to just being able to form an image in the mind. And the third eye could be considered like assimilating information from other realms of life. That's not necessarily the function of the mind's eye, but so there are accounts that I've read. I haven't worked with anybody that I've recommended do any substances or anything like that, but I've read that sometimes cannabis opens up visualization experience for people. Right. Yeah, mind's eye / pineal gland. And then there's other people who, you know, they've done cannabis, nothing, no visualization opened up whatsoever. Then there's other people that maybe took something a little stronger, like a hallucinogenic or a psychedelic, like mushrooms or LSD or something like that, and totally experienced like their first ever mind's eye experience ever, where they're very aware that they're starting to see images in their mind. But then again, there's accounts as well on Reddit, Facebook that I ran across of people experiencing aphantasia that take these substances that don't have anything happen. And so this just came up in the Discord server too, like a couple of days ago. Somebody said, "Oh, I tried this one time, and this is what opened up." And I was like, "Hey, that's cool. You're one of the few. If it's something does open up for somebody when doing the substances, it seems like just a case-by-case basis sort of thing. We definitely don't have enough data yet to say that on average this many people would experience the mind's eye after a psychedelic experience or not. So since those things aren't super legal, all I'll say is some people do, some people don't. Let's see, Heidi. Now you mentioned memories. Is it normal for aphantasia to have a hard time remembering their memories? Can you say that in English? Can I say, yeah. Can I say that in English? I'm not sure what you meant by that last part of the question. Can you say that in English? That's the only language I know. Well, I know a little Spanish and Japanese, but I don't think that would be beneficial for anybody at the moment. Maybe Spanish. But yeah, so let's address that question. Is it normal for people Gotcha. Well, you can let me know if I answer clear enough, okay? So, oh yeah, and you worded it right. You worded it perfect. So, totally. Perfectly worded. Okay, so let me remind myself what you were saying. Is it harder for aphantasics to remember their memories? Yes. So there's a really interesting study that just came out from University of Exeter that has been quite beneficial, I would say. And if you guys haven't read it, I guess I could post it. Actually, let me find it. I'll just post it into the chat here. But there's a really interesting study that they just recently put out where they took a survey of quite a large number of people that were experiencing aphantasia and then quite a large number of people that were experiencing the mind's eye. And I think they specifically sought after hyperphantasics. And what they asked was like, how does it affect day-to-day life? What are the differences? They were trying to look for the differences, right? And one thing that they found was that on average, people experiencing aphantasia are more likely to experience something like SDAM, which is severely deficient autobiographical memory. So yes, their memories were affected on average, but I say on average because there's always going to be the extremes of the bell curve, right? On any sort of statistic, you'll see like a peak in the middle and then it goes back down on the other side. And so there were people at the bottom that really had zero biographical memory, autobiographical memory, and then there were people on the other side that were experiencing aphantasia that maybe they had very strong autobiographical memory, but it's a case-by-case thing. But on average, we see that it does affect people's memories. And people with mind's eye hyperphantasia activity, they're less likely. That's what this study showed. Now, they admitted in the study, and I think it was really wise, of course, you have to consider all things in the data. They admitted at the end, they recognized that their study it's still based in subjectivity. So everybody coming into that study and doing the questionnaires and stuff like that, they were all self-prescribed experiencers of aphantasia. Notice how I don't like saying aphantasics because it's like a label. And labels make it harder to move out of something sometimes. So nobody's hyperphantasics, nobody's aphantasics. They're all people experiencing these different phenomenons. And so, yeah, the people experiencing hyperphantasia did have better autobiographical memory on average. Of course, there's exceptions, like I said. Let's see, Charlene, I really love doing hallucinogens. DMT and salvia are the only one I've experienced something that's not there, but more like a dream. But I've heard about decalcifying it too because maybe it's fluoride. Yeah. There's studies on some of what you're talking about with the third eye idea with the pineal gland. There's still a lot of skepticism, right? And understandably, there's a lot of skepticism from the mainstream scientific community, but there are people like Dr. Strauss, I can't remember what his first name is, doing trying to measure some of these things with the pineal gland and how it operates and how it affects our imagination and stuff like that. But so far, it's really not, those concepts aren't yet, we don't have enough data on that stuff to say one way or another. That's how I look at it. You know, I like to keep my mind open to see what we can find out later on. Yeah, and DMT, that's supposed to be like radically, it's just supposed to send you on a trip, a 10-minute trip to other places, really. I've never done that, but. Maybe there are more natural things that to make it more active. Yeah, well, I mean, if we're talking about substances, I'm not sure. I have ran across just like maybe 1 or 2 anecdotal accounts on the forums of people saying the diet really helped them develop a mind's eye, but I'm sure it's not the norm. Again, there's these exceptions, and there's these certain people that will experience something and some people won't. I see. Oh, let me find that link to that study real quick, guys, because that would be good. Why not? Go in my Discord server here. We have a research channel, so I'm trying to find it here. Yeah, here it is. Okay. That's that study I was mentioning before. I don't know if it shows up as a link, but you can copy and paste it into your browser. Yeah, it's really interesting to read through that, because up until now, we haven't really had any data across the scientific community to say whether or not objectively, like, aphantasia affects people in this way or that way. There's been a lot of accounts, a lot of people sharing on forums, of course, but this is one of the first studies that I know of that takes kind of a broader spectrum of people and goes, okay, how does it actually affect your day-to-day? You know, and up until now, a lot of the conversation has been that we haven't really seen that it affects people or like holds them back in life. And then that study right there would at least show us a few data points. It's like, yeah, people experiencing aphantasia, they are less likely to remember things as clearly, less likely to be in creative fields. That's one of the things that the study talks about. Now, that, of course, that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, right? And there's some incredibly talented artists that experience aphantasia or whatever it may, whatever different fields it may be. Charlene says, I've been blind in my mind's eye my whole life, so I'd need something more extreme, I assume, but trying my best to learn how to rewire my brain and make those connections work. Yeah, totally. And I'm ever the optimist within this topic. You know, I'll stand on my soapbox till the day I die. Is like, you can do it. That's I've seen that from people. I've experienced that now working with people, and again, people that I haven't even worked with. You can totally do it. It's very possible. I'll stand on that. And I'm sure there's exceptions to that. I'm sure there's going to be people that even I work with that don't experience breakthrough here and there. But I love problem solving. So it's like, if there's something that you desire in your life, go for it as hard as you can, and you can totally make it happen. One thing that's interesting about rewiring the brain that you made me think of, you can do it, Heidi, yes. That's a good question too, ADHD and aphantasia. I'm not totally sure about that one. Frozen. Can you guys still hear me? It looks like my video on my monitor is going weird. Okay, no, I'm still here. Yeah, ADHD, like I was saying, not totally sure we have any data on that yet. So, okay, great. Thank you, Heidi. But I wanted to mention, so you, Charlene, you mentioned learning how to rewire the brain, right? One of the things that I'm pretty convinced about now is early on when I started doing this work back in 2018, I was, you know, thought processing and doing little experiments around the topic of aphantasia. And a lot of the people on the forums were saying stuff like, our brain is just wired differently, right? Now, what's interesting about that thought is I'm very open to that possibility. And actually, in the fMRI studies, we have seen that somebody experiencing aphantasia, their brain is operating differently. Very, very true. Though, when your eye is taking in information, this is how the information goes. It goes to the optical nerve back here, and then it travels down these lines back to the occipital lobe. And then the brain starts to decode that visual information that's coming in through your eyes, and then it sends the information up the back of the brain like this. There's a study that I read on this. I would have to really hunt to try to find it, but so I might be getting some of the details wrong. Just keep that in mind. It's off of memory. Now, when the information goes up this way, that's what we call visual sight, right? It's just natural. Your eyes are open. You're taking in information from the outside world. Now, when people are asked to close their eyes and visually imagine, then they saw that the metabolic activity would go the other direction. So it starts from up here and goes down to the occipital lobe. And that's what the brain is doing when it's visually imagining something. Same regions of the brain are being used, right? So early on, I thought, well, that's really interesting to think about, because that means that the brain just isn't wired wrong, or like something isn't hooked up correctly. It's just that the brain has learned for whatever reason, or maybe it's not even learned. It's just a disposition, which is why they call it congenital aphantasia, right? It's there since birth. Maybe the brain, for whatever reason, is just processing the information differently. And sure enough, that's what the fMRIs of aphantasia brain, people experiencing aphantasia, what those fMRI studies does show is that when they're looking at something and describing it or taking in information, then the visual center is very active. But as soon as they close their eyes and try to imagine that spot, different regions of the brain are active. And one of those regions is known to be related to semantic recall, so recalling words and using language. And that's why a lot of most exercises use words to describe sensory information. Try to get those when you actually want them to. So I did a whole key video. Some of you might have seen it, but I did a whole key video on that, describing it really in depth. So I'm thinking less and less. My hypothesis is it's not so much a wiring thing, but like a perception thing. It's like the way that the brain and the way that it's the way that the brain has learned to perceive and decode information. Thanks, Heidi. I try. Yeah, try to look up that study. If I can find it, I'll post it somewhere. But that study is really interesting with learning how the brain is decoding visual information. Like I said, I'd have to really hunt to be able to find it again, but I should, because I reference it quite a bit, actually. So, yeah. Yeah, so that's just some thoughts, on that. Those of you who are watching, do you have any questions for me, or like questions on the topic in general? Like I said, when I posted about this, I'll try my best to answer, but I'll be the first to let you know I don't know everything. Still trying to figure it all out, just the same as everybody else. So definitely don't know everything. I even tell the people on my Discord server, like, hey, my techniques work, they are working for people, but there's other techniques that will work for other people too. So it's not like I have the magic sauce. But have you seen, so Charlene asked, but have you seen people with your work actually go from blind to have some ability? Yeah, absolutely. Part of why I've been around so long, there's sometimes a little bit of kickback, right? And understandably, it's like, we shouldn't just trust anybody that claims to have some sort of thing they've developed, especially when it's such a new field of research. But I've been doing this for 2 years now, and I wouldn't be doing it still if it wasn't actually getting people results. So people have been able to go from zero. Like one of my students just recently, he did the ECourse, but he went from describing zero mind's eye activity. Now, throughout his life, he had had moments, like very slight moments, but it was nothing that he could access consciously at any time like that. And so he ran across my content a year ago, just started to practice on his own, saw a little bit of progress, jumped into the ECourse just like 3 weeks ago. And he went from 0 to pretty much, I mean, he's at like, I would say he's just above hypophantasia now, where his mind's eye is just right there and it's on these varying degrees of vividness. So I was trying to help him when we wrapped up our sessions just recently. I was trying to help him now direct into or grow into hyperphantasia, and he would have like moments of it. So there are people that have had a quite drastic breakthrough where it's like, it even surprises me. He was one of them. He was actually, I would say, the most drastic breakthrough I've seen so far. And it's like, he started from describing nothing to just boom, full-blown mind's eye activity. And he had spatial awareness in his mind and moving quickly towards hyperphantasia. So it definitely does happen. And then other people, when it's more subtle, like maybe during the course of 5, 6, especially back when I first started, they would see moments of breakthrough, like maybe a handful, like, oh, that was different. That's new for me. I thought of something a little more visual, I could tell. Then those people, I try to leave the keys in their hands and now they know how to access it again to continue forward and build forward. And of course, I'm always there if they want to continue to work with me on it. But it's like learning an instrument. It's like you can get the chopsticks on the piano. That's not too hard, but then to learn how to play Bach or something, that's going to take a lot more practice, just like that. But yeah, long way to answer that question. It differs from person to person, but people have done it. Hey, No Name. I joined the stream a minute ago. Is there a change in memory style after developing mind's eye? Very interesting question, and one that I get a lot. So I'll be completely honest, I can't answer that question with complete certainty yet, because there's just not enough people that have developed a mind's eye, like consistently anyway. People that work with me get breakthroughs, right? But then following that track and developing full-blown mind's eye is another thing. So I don't have enough data yet on how many people actually get from 0 to developing a mind's eye. There's a few, right, like I was just describing, but I don't have enough data on a whole to say that I'm actually planning to work out soon is getting more objective measurements of where people are at before and then where people are at after. What I can say, though, is more than once on a session, there's one exercise where somebody's describing a memory, right? And more than one time on a session, I had somebody say, okay, I was, reliving or out from the memory that they never would have remembered ever again in their life. Like it was just some detail that their brain had totally just never taken note of or forgot, it seemed like totally forgotten about. And then that memory just like poof, pops right back up. For instance, one of my students in January, she was walking me back through a memory of going on a walk with her dog. It was like from a month before, something like that. I'll catch up on the comments after I finish this thought. But so she was describing this memory, and in the memory, she was, she was walking on this trail next to a lake, and there was a swan out on the lake. And after the exercise, she goes, "Oh my gosh, like I never would have remembered that swan." But it will be really interesting to see when we have more people that have developed the mind's eye from nothing, how their memory is affected on a grand scale. I'm curious too. I'm optimistic. I hope people are able to access memories differently. Actually, one of my ECourse students right now wanted to have that as an effect, and so I told him exactly what I told you guys. It's uncertain right now, but it could be, and we'll have to keep track of it as we go. So Charlene says, that's amazing. Yeah, it is. It's crazy. Even a little bit would be mind-blowing. Yeah, that's wonderful. You found a way to break through. Yeah, and like I said, not just me, but I have been working with people, do help people, yeah. But there's other people too that are like came up with their own stuff or came up with their own exercise and were able to find progress too. So, and one of the reasons why I was even wanting to give this a shot in the first place is just kind of, this is how I've lived my life. Like whatever I wanted to experience, I would just go after. Like the first time I heard about somebody doing projection style imaging where they close their eyes, it's not just black, but they can see like they're wearing a VR headset or something like that, was way back in 2010. And I heard this guy talking about it, and he was trying to describe how to do it, but it didn't make any sense to me. He said, "Oh, it's like a black piece of paper. Just tear it in half. You'll be able to see right through it." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" So, I really wanted to do that. How would I do it? I thought of all these exercises. I created my own little thing around it and then practiced and was able to end up looking into it for myself. And then it went from like very basic kind of lines and just outlines of stuff. It went from that to being kind of filled in outlines. Like it was almost like an outline of white and then filled in with white. And then it went to a little more detail, and then it went to like full-blown 3D projection style, but I can't do that all the time. It's something I have to kind of be in the right mind state for. So yeah, so this whole aphantasia meow thing has been kind of an offshoot of my own style of living. It's like whatever we want to go for in life, like as long as we don't take no for an answer, and as long as we don't give up on something, then we're way more likely to see that thing happen, right? The only way to have a 0% chance is to not try. So there's still stuff that I'm trying for, that I'm going for too. Are there different results with people who can and cannot dream? Different results. So do you mean, now let me try to clarify, because I want to make sure to answer that correctly. Do you mean that somebody coming in to working on the mind's eye, let's say somebody that has not been able to dream and then going through sessions and seeing where they get, and then versus somebody that has been able to dream and then seeing where they get? Is that what you're asking, if there's a difference there? Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And quite honestly, I haven't measured that data point. I haven't measured that data point. What I'm doing now, part of what I'm developing now is, like I mentioned it earlier, is a more objective kind of set of data points to run somebody through when they come or when I start working with them. And eventually I'll probably make that thing live, just so that somebody that isn't working with me but still working on it for themselves can measure some data points as they go. But that's a really, really good question. And I haven't measured that data point, but that's something that I'll definitely be tracking, because it's a good question. Like maybe somebody that has visual dreams at night, maybe they would be more apt, maybe their brain is already prepped in a way to make more progress as they work on the visualization ability. It's a reasonable hypothesis to have. So excellent question, No Name. I wish I had a better answer, but it's unknown at this point. Yeah. I have noticed that some people start with the mind's eye practice and then like break into having more dreams, or have an increase of their dream life, or have an increase in vividness in their dream life, but not necessarily measuring the effect of practicing if they already come in with dreams. Heidi says, I've traveled a lot, the coolest road trips in the States of Europe, and I don't have a single memory from the experiences. Somehow I have no imagination. Is it possible to change that? Yeah, Charlene also says, just to wrap up the dream thought real quick, Heidi, I'll come back to you right there. But Charlene says, I dream a lot, or I dream, but still it's a blind mind's eye, right? So here's one stat, yeah. So yeah, if you want to start practicing, start really going after it, seeing where you come to. Even been able to lucid dream, that's fantastic. But Heidi, yeah, I hear you. I really empathize with you in that. And it's interesting how you put it. Somehow I have no imagination, no visual imagination, right? But I would say it's a good way to look at it anyway. Is not that you don't have no imagination, because that would be, you'd be completely devoid of thinking of anything outside of your norm or being creative at all. But I definitely think most people have some sort of creative aspect to them, even with the experience of aphantasia or SDAM. I have time now, yeah, so I plan to, right? I know, it's like, it's time to have some fun with some of this stuff. Charlene, you should definitely jump in the Discord server and connect with the others in there, because some of the other people in there are very interested in having this conversation all the time and finding out ways to hack their own mind and develop visualization for themselves. So it's been really, really cool. But Charlene, or Heidi, you also asked, is it possible to change that? I will ever, like I said earlier, I'm ever going to be the optimist on this, because I've worked with so many people now and I've seen so many breakthroughs with people. Very few number have not been able to access something different. And most of those people that haven't have been like special cases. Like one of them only worked with me for one session, then kind of disappeared, so I didn't hear from him again. So it didn't really give us a fighting chance. And then the other ones were special cases too. So to give an idea, out of the 20, how many is it now? Well, this is an outdated number, but it's a number in my mind. Out of the 26 people that I've worked with directly, not including ECourse students, out of the 26 people that I've worked with directly, 23 of them were able to experience something different. And that's on a spectrum though. Like some were very subtle breakthroughs, some were very, very drastic, like this guy that I was mentioning earlier. So it just depends on the individual and how far they can come and what time frame. But so far, I'm like, yeah, if you want to go after it, as long as you're practicing the mind's eye and not other types of visualizations, like you'll be able to make progress. That's how it seems right now. And one of the reasons why I'm putting together more set data points is to have a more objective measurement of how far people can come. So I do believe, I'm optimistic. You know, I would encourage you. I can't say for sure, it's not that sort of thing, but I would encourage you, Heidi, that you can change it. Now, one of the things that's going to be really interesting too is the phenomenon of SDAM, right? Severely deficient autobiographical memory, where people have a really hard time recalling anything from their life. I'll wrap up this thought, then I'll catch up on the comments here. But SDAM is really interesting. And like I said earlier in this new study, people experiencing aphantasia do show an increase in how their memory, or the aspects of memory, you know, there is something that we're able to measure in people that self-prescribe aphantasia, to how they remember, how much they can remember, how much they can visually remember. So it's still up in the air in terms of if developing a mind's eye like helps affect SDAM. We don't know yet. We really don't. But it's something we'll definitely track as we go. One of the problems is I'm one of the few people that's talking about affecting it, right? I know Anthony Metivier at Magnetic Memory Method, he's talked about how he went from aphantasia into visualization too. We didn't work together, by the way. It just happened for him. And so there are people out there that are talking about it from the standpoint that I love to take, which is like, hey, if we want something in life, let's go for it. Let's not take no for an answer. Let's go after it. Not be stressed about it, but like, no, let's build what we want to, right? Even if it's changing how our brain processes thoughts. So I'm ever the optimist in that, and I will encourage everybody till the day that I die to go after what they really want and not take no for an answer. Heidi's, oh, yeah, empathizing with Heidi. Yep, me too. Yeah. So to join the Discord server, I have a video that I posted maybe a month ago or so. That was the announcement video, and all the info's on there. The link, the invite link, and everything is on there. In short, though, you'd have to create your Discord account, download the app either to your phone or computer, or whichever one. I have it on both. And then click the actual invite link after you make your account, and it'll send you to the Discord server. Now, I'll warn you, though, that the intro process in there, if you've never used Discord before, is kind of weird. Like, I have a sorting process all set up, so some people have popped in and then kind of got lost and didn't know how to sort themselves, and then they left right away. If you have that, just feel free to email me if it's hard to navigate for you. Or you can post. There's a channel in there called Help Me Start, and you can post in there. and we'll help you get set up. I have some admin on the team too that help people when they're coming in. So yeah, I'm definitely hopeful that the mind's eye will affect quite a lot of ways that people remember and access different things. I feel like I shouldn't go on a journey because my memory is in knowing. Skips the visual, right? But I can't look back and see sure. Well, interesting you say that, Charlene. Now here's a really interesting thought. Oh my goodness, this reminds me too. I have too many thoughts coming. But there's a TED Talk that's really wonderful. It's called We Hallucinate. I think it's called this. Let me look it up just so I make sure to name it right in case you guys want to see it. Actually, I'll just find it. Hallucinate Our Reality. So this TED Talk is wonderful. You guys should totally check it out. You're so welcome. Yeah, no problem. But one interesting thing that's talked at length about in this TED Talk, this is a neuroscientist talking here from that video. In that video, he brings up the point that really our brain is always piecing together information as it kind of perceives it to be on the outside. And this is why even for people with a very, very vivid visual imagination, like people experiencing hyperphantasia, they still will not show 100% accuracy typically in how they remember things. Even though they can look back and review it in their mind, eyewitness accounts sometimes are so vastly different from one another because the visual imagination might be strong, but the memory of it is definitely not accurate sometimes. Like for me, this has happened plenty of times because I experience hyperphantasia, right? I experience prophantasia. Hyperphantasia is the one that I use more often in the mind. But if I look back and if I try to remember something visually, I know that there's some things that I won't get right. Like if I recalled a trip that I did, like a snowboard trip, I don't know, a few years ago with some friends, this was 5 or 6 years ago. I can't quite remember how the building was connected. And yeah, so that's just a thought, you know, because and on the flip side, some people describing aphantasia have had an extremely accurate visual memory, which we don't quite know how that works. Like they can think of and recall exactly where things are and different things like that. So it's really fascinating. We have a lot to find out. Like I said in that new study, you know, it seems like the bell curve of it, it seems like on average, people experiencing aphantasia will have less accurate or less active visual memory. But it doesn't apply to everyone. There will always be exceptions. So it's very interesting. Lots more to find out, right? This has been fun, guys. I hope you're having fun. Do younger people get different results than older? According to the people that I've worked with, now let me really think about that. I haven't made it a specific data point to keep track. Age, like I said earlier, I'm planning on introducing more of these specific data points now because I'm moving more into like the objective realm. I have a lot of subjective breakthrough with people and people saying, yeah, come out having something different. But this is one of these data points that I haven't really been super specific. I haven't at all actually asked people what age they were when we started sessions. So it's a good question. I would say, I know there's a few college students I've worked with, but there's been a few older people that I've worked with too, 40s, 50s, 60s. And I haven't noticed age play a huge part in how people experience breakthrough or what they're able to access. But again, it's one of these data points that I'll have to start keeping track of and find out more as we go. There's just not enough people that have gotten breakthrough yet to know for sure too. I'm sure after like a couple of years or 10 years of people getting breakthrough with me and other people, with me and other methods, they'll we'll be able to see some interesting data points. But yeah, you'll check that out too. Probably hard to quantify long-term memory in those tests. Yes. Hopefully more will come out in the studies over time. Yeah. And I got my own ideas too, of studies that I want to run. Even when I can afford it, I have some plans for my own fMRI studies too, but I'll have to build a team around it and stuff since I'm just an entrepreneur and coach at heart. I'll have to bring on some people that know how to sift through that type of data and whatnot. But yeah, we have a lot to find out. And it's a really exciting time to be having this conversation too, because it's the first time we've really put to language some of the experience of the mind's eye and the experience of how we process thought, right? Do people who develop a mind's eye experience an improvement in problem-solving capabilities? I hate to come back to you with so many I don't knows, but I'll just be as transparent as possible, right? Not sure yet. Not sure yet. It's still to be seen. Definitely not enough people out there who have developed the mind's eye yet to be able to tell. And yeah, that's it. I don't know. Maybe. We'll just have to see. My most recent ECourse student that I was mentioning earlier, who had like some of the most drastic breakthroughs so far, definitely was perceiving things differently. He's an artist, and when he would look at images now, his brain could piece together where the perspective of that illustration was off like never before. So it's a very reasonable hypothesis at this point that maybe it does affect how we solve problems, how we approach situations, but again, not sure yet. It's kind of funny, even when people are having like a first call with me and they're weighing out if they want to work with me directly or whatever, and they'll ask some of these things like, I want to be better at math, or I want my memory, or I want to be better at art. Hopefully developing the mind's eye will do that. I just answer just like I'm doing to you guys right now. I'm like, I can't claim, will never claim something that I don't know for sure. And I won't claim that it actually improves any of that stuff yet. We just don't know. So, good questions though. No name, you're thinking like a scientist. Thinking critically there. Everybody is. These are all great questions. But yeah, it's definitely something that I'm curious to see. That's part of why I soft launched this e-course again, is to get more of the technique out to people. And it's a lower price point than my normal coaching, because my one-on-one time is quite valuable to me. But I'm hoping, and the Discord server is proving to be this too, is more people can start to try to affect their mental space and try to experience something outside of their experience of aphantasia, and then we'll have more data points to pull from people that went from 0 to progressing to somewhere beyond aphantasia. So, but it's still a growing movement. My voice is getting tired. I might have to do a Zoom call sometime. That would be fun, huh? Because then we could all talk to each other and have some back and forth. Which we are through the comments, but it would be fun to hear people and see people's faces too. So I think I'll do that. I think that's what I'll do next. Let's see. How do you feel is the best way to explain to someone who is not experiencing aphantasia what it is? Sometimes people fight me, on it for a while and don't seem to understand it. I know, I feel you. And you say super down, I assume that you mean that it's it's not fun. It's not fun to have that happen. And it's a really good question. Is there a way to support via Patreon or something similar? I'm going to circle back around to your question here, Charlene, too, and we can kind of bounce off each other on that. But is there a way to support via Patreon or something similar? I considered launching a Patreon at one point, and I never did, because I didn't think that was the best avenue for me to put my effort and energy into. So I've opted to instead develop programs that were more specific. But if it's like in the programs I can put all my resources into, right? And I want to make sure to have some free offerings too, which is why I did I want to actually give massive free value, which is why I did the Key series, those 5 videos that I released most recently. But Patreon might be something that I do in the future. I'm not sure. As of now, there's nothing like that. I would say, if you want to support the work that I'm doing and kind of breaking this ground, just partake in the conversation. That's one of the biggest ways to support it right now. Go after it yourself, see what you can do by practicing on your own, and see what you can access, see how your mind really works, and partake in the conversation. The Discord server is one of the best ways to do that. And the Reddits are really active. I don't admin those, I don't mod those, but they're really, really active. So other people experiencing aphantasia and hyperphantasia and all that. But yeah, maybe I'll have something like that in the future. Not quite now though. So yeah, how do I feel is the best way to explain it to somebody? And they do fight you. I've had that too. Even though I've never experienced aphantasia, it is hard to get somebody who's always had a visual imagination their whole life, right, to even comprehend that they don't experience images in their mind. Like when I first found out about it back in 2011, it was my roommate, and I was like, "What? You can't." It didn't make sense to me. And my roommates and I back then, we speaking to this one guy who experienced aphantasia, didn't have a name back then, but we were like, well, you're not supposed to physically see anything. Like, it's okay if it's just black, but it's in your head. And he goes, no, yeah, I get nothing. And so that was a mind blow for me too. But I would say, there are legitimate studies on this topic now. And so if anything, like if somebody's really wanting to fight, there's nothing really you can do about it. It's just, they're not going to be able to see past how they perceive thought. But if they are open to hearing some of the more legitimate studies on it, that first study back in 2015, where aphantasia was coined by Dr. Zeman and the others at University of Exeter, that one's wonderfully written. It's got really good data in there. They studied this guy, patient MX, over the course of months, did fMRIs with him and everything. So that specific study is fantastic. And if they want to read up on it, that might be one of the best ways to help somebody understand where somebody experiencing aphantasia is coming from. Because it shows up in the fMRI, It's hard to refute if there's actual fMRI physical data behind somebody having this experience, right? So, but yeah. I hope that was an answer, kind of, Charlene. It's tricky. It is very tricky. I'm going to think about it more too. I've explained it through memory using other senses. Usually a person is blind in some sense. I can experience touch, but taste and smell is hard for most. Zeman, Z-E-M-E, let me make sure. I think, yeah, it's Z, his name's Adam Zeman, Z-E-M-A-N. Yeah, and actually what you said right there is better than how I answered, quite honestly. Most people, it is harder for them to imagine taste and smell, yes. I've seen that too. I've noticed that as well. It's the same for me, actually, because I can vividly visually imagine, but my sense of smell in my mind is very, very weak. It's better than it used to be, but it's still very weak. So that's a good parallel to draw, for other people. I had that conversation at work. Colleagues cannot really comprehend. Yeah. Cannot see my boyfriend's face, right? I hear you, Heidi. Yeah. I made a meme that I posted on my Facebook page back a while ago. That's quite silly. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's the lady with the mathematical symbols, and she's looking like this, like very confused. And above the picture was my family's face when I first described aphantasia to them. It's just super confusing for people that haven't ever even thought that was an experience, right? So yeah, there's also different types of thought. I mean, there's other types of thought that one of my Discord members is talking about quite often recently. That's unsymbolic thought. I forget how she calls it or how they call it. But they say it's like unsymbolized thought or something like that. And it's more abstract. Maybe it doesn't even have words. Maybe it's thinking of something without there being any kind of sensory information at all, not even word, like I said, not words or anything like that. So if somebody's not aware that other people can, oh yeah, interesting, right? Super interesting. I've had moments of that, and I can kind of flip on perception like that in my thought life, but it's not all the time for me. My default is words and visuals. Do they have any studies on how it affects partnerships? My boyfriend is the biggest skeptic, and I know it's like I have gaps in my abilities as a person to recall words said in fights is almost impossible. Right. That is excellent. No, as far as I know, there's no studies on how it affects partnerships at this point. That would be really, really interesting. The kind of the social impact of not having a visual imagination or not being able to access memories in a certain way. Yeah, but yeah, not as far as I know, no studies on that quite yet. It seems like most of the scientific community is trying to figure out the actual how the brain is working. You know, that's really been the focus. And now Exeter's starting to do bigger surveys, like I posted earlier, where they're trying to find out what sort of impact it's having on people's lives, which is great. But yeah, good thoughts, everyone. It is frustrating. I've heard that from so many people, that when they try to describe it to certain people, those other people retort, well, you're just not thinking of it right. Or, oh, no, you have to be using visuals to think of something, you know. It's just not the case. It seems that thought can appear in many different ways. So, hey, how y'all doing? Are we glad we got to connect? I'm super glad I got to connect with all of you. Let's see. Charlene says it has a lot of social impact as well as on loss, because once a person is gone from your life or dies, it is different than for others, right? Can't see them again, right? Outside of pictures, right? Outside of having a photograph of something. I feel ya. This is partly why I started doing this in the first place, was because I heard and I empathized with where people were at and how they experienced thought life, and especially, so I found out about the phenomenon itself back in 2011 with my roommate, right? And even back then, like he was like, this is how he put it, I really want to be able to imagine things in my mind visually. And I just empathized with him. Like, it was always such a natural part of my life. And so my heart just immediately went to, like, I feel for you, bro, you know? And even during that year that we lived together, or we lived together for 2 years, but even during that time when I first found out that from him, I wanted to help because he actually wanted it. So that's where I was coming from. He wanted it so bad, and I wanted to help in any way I could. So I tried to develop exercises even back then, but they had to do with after images. And what I realized now is I was actually closer, back then I was closer to developing prophantasia for him than the mind's eye. And so it never did anything for him, and he just moved on. He just kind of forgot about it. And talking with my cousin, that was the first person I worked with back in 2018. Talking with her, I found out about her experience of aphantasia maybe a year after, or like a year and a half after my roommate. And I realized with her that she was in the same position as him. Like, yeah, this is how I experienced thought, and it's a bummer. I wish I could, but I just can't. And so that empathy just kind of sparked up in me, and I didn't actually get any keys to be able to follow through and help people to break through until 2018, where that was the first time I ran across some of the research. Any studies on trauma affecting it? How do I participate in these studies? I discovered it around the same time you did, yeah. I thought my friend was schizophrenic, seeing things that weren't there. Right, interesting point there. We have a lot to find out of how the visual imagination works within schizophrenia. Yeah, totally. You appreciate the empathy, you know. Yeah, that's just how I work, I guess. It's my natural response to feel for them, you know. So social. So what did you ask here? Studies on effect of trauma. Oh yeah, that's what I was looking for. I don't remember if this most recent study coming out of Exeter or one of the recent studies I posted here in the chat. I don't remember if it talks about trauma, but just anecdotally, at least, across the forums, it does seem that trauma has some aspect to it. There's quite a few people that I've spoken with, even that have said that they kind of had mind's eye activity before, and then a traumatic experience happened in life, and then they lost it. So we do know that trauma definitely affects how the mind processes information, and it can affect the visual imagination for sure. So in terms of studies, not quite sure if there's much on that yet. And how do you participate in these studies? So one of the best things you could do is keep in touch with the communities that are talking about aphantasia right now. The Reddit subreddits, aphantasia subreddit. There's also a hyperphantasia subreddit. The Discord server that I'm running always has new stuff that people are posting in there. The Facebook groups. So there's a couple bigger aphantasia-oriented Facebook groups. And a lot of times you'll see professors and university leaders and stuff like that pop in there and go, hey, we're running a study. But other than that, you would just have to keep up to date with what universities are running, what programs. Exeter and University of South Wales at Pearson Lab, it's a guy named Joel Pearson. They're doing a lot of work within visual imagination, mind's eye, aphantasia. Yeah, and Heidi said, Charlene, I have thought the same thing. My best friend died 2 years ago. And even though I suffered from the loss, my memory of him is very vague. My emotion is very much alive. Yeah. I feel you, Heidi. I feel you. I feel both of you. That's such a huge point, that you can't kind of revisit the visual. So I want to leave this open for any other last thoughts or questions. I'm going to start being a little conscious of my own voice here. My voice is getting a little tired. Hugs. Yes. I think it's time for lunch for me, but I'm going to start wrapping it up here. Thank you so much, guys, for coming in and hanging out. It was a real nice, real special time. Good time to connect. I hope it was some relief from the global craziness right now. Get our minds off of that for a little while and just time for bed. I hear you. Hailing from Denmark. Awesome. You're welcome. Yes, absolutely. Please keep in contact. You are amazing as well. Wonderful. Okay, everyone. So fun to connect, and I'll plan to Zoom chat sometime so we can actually have back and forth face-to-face connection. So we'll do that next probably. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll connect soon. Feel free to email me. Let's hang out. Okay. Yes, Heidi would love that. I think we got to do that next then. Bye.